than 24 hours, Bulldog Nation is going to be taking over Atlanta as Georgia takes on Alabama in the national championship. Now, as we look ahead to tomorrow night's big game, we're remembering what it was like 37 years ago. That's the last time the Georgia Bulldogs played in the national championship, January 1st, 1981. Back then, Atlantans' favorite complaint was, of course, traffic jams on the downtown connector. Maynard Jackson was Atlanta's mayor during that time. George Busby was the governor, and Georgia's Jimmy Carter was still president. Just more than 2 million people lived in metro Atlanta back then. Now it's nearly 6 million people strong. John Sherrick was just starting here at 11 Alive, and Jerry Carnes was a proud UGA student who was in the stands of the Superdome watching the big victory. And John, this had to be a huge story for you as a young reporter.
It was a huge story. Back then, the Bulldogs' undefeated season that fall of 1980 was phenomenal. But what times those were for Atlanta. Tragic, transformational. I just started working here, and we were in the midst of a nightmare in January of '81. The Atlanta serial child murders. Someone was abducting and murdering children. It would be 6 more months, June of '81, before Wayne Williams was arrested, and the murders stopped. Ted Turner was in his prime. He just started CNN in Atlanta. Back then, it was a true 24-hour-a-day news network. MARTA had just started building the rail lines. Only a few short east-west sections were open. The brand new airport terminal had just opened under Mayor Jackson's leadership, the airport that would later bear his name. And imagine, you didn't have to pay more than $6 a day to park there. And the Falcons were going to the playoffs. I remember fans lined up at the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium for days to buy tickets. Top price, $15. There were no online ticket sales back then. You had to be there to stand in line. And of course, Jimmy Carter had just lost the presidency to Ronald Reagan. Carter was on his way out of office. And I remember going to Dobbins. One of President Carter's last trips on Air Force One was to Dobbins to pick up his Georgia friends. And then they all flew to New Orleans to watch the big game. But, you know, in a way, not that much has changed. Atlanta and Georgia sports fans are still long suffering. Their hearts have been broken too many times, only to heal fast. And now here we are, hoping again, just that far from the top of Everest. And no matter what happens, it sure feels good.
Yeah, it feels really good here. 37 years ago. Now, Jerry, during that time, you were just a young pup in the stands, a UGA student.
No gray hair back then.
No gray hair back then. What was it like for you back then?
It was incredible. I was talking with my wife, we were dating at the time, and there was an evening in Athens, Georgia, and we were sitting around, and somebody said, you know, tickets are going on sale for the Notre Dame, Georgia Sugar Bowl. Let's go down and see if we can get tickets. Figuring we wouldn't get any, we ran down to the Coliseum, put our names in a lottery, and then I had a ticket in my hand, $15 for that Falcons playoff. It was $17 to get a ticket to the Sugar Bowl. And then we got to go see the Sugar Bowl, and Georgia beat Notre Dame 17-10, and we rushed the field afterward. And I'm going to tell you something about then and now. Then, Georgia fans traveled and devoted to their team, and they do it still now. If you remember when we played Notre Dame again in South Bend, there were more Georgia fans, I believe, than Notre Dame fans there. And we took over New Orleans during the end of December and beginning of 1981.
And I was going to ask you about that. So I had an opportunity this past week, right, to ring the victory bell after the Dogs had beaten the Sooners. And it's really infectious, you know, getting caught up in the spirit of Dog Nation. But what's the difference between what we're experiencing now and what you guys experienced back in 1980? The same type fever?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Georgia fans are devoted. They were then, they are now. I remember just so distinctly winning that game in the Sugar Bowl and how we rushed the field, and the announcers were going with the Georgia fans, please leave the field. We've got a band who wants to play. And we would not go. We just relished in that moment. But watching on television this time, the Rose Bowl, I got those same emotions. They all came back watching my team win. I mean, Georgia fans are very devoted.
And, you know, back then, I remember I was just starting out here. I worked weekends, and everybody was a Bulldog fan then, because as the season evolved, we would listen to the radio somehow in the middle of the workday, listening to Larry Munson, the wondrous Larry Munson, whose play-by-plays, as the Bulldogs battle to win week after week.
Lindsey's got 45-50, 45-40, run, Lindsey, 25-20, 50, 10, 5, Lindsey, stop, Lindsey, stop, Lindsey, stop.
Okay, so can you guys adopt me as a UGA fan?
Oh,
that
you're
I'm
part of the- you're part of the
part of
family
that
now.
dog spirit now, right?
You got your red tie on.
I got my red tie on, I got my black jacket and my black jeans. So hopefully we don't have to wait another 37 years before UGA shows up for another national championship.
If so,
game.
we'll all be here to talk about it.
That's
I'm
right.
sure.
We'll all be here to talk about it. We'll just still be young pups. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for your perspective. I really appreciate that.